Welcome to Hoosier Game Day, presented by the Hoosier Network. I'm Ava Wegenke. Co-host Nick Abel is out today, but that's all right. He'll be back next week. Indiana defeated Illinois last week 63-10 in a top-ranked matchup, a very big test for the Hoosiers. Nonetheless, though, they are headed on the road to Iowa on this Saturday in a hostile road environment. This week, I've got a great guest lined up for us, breaking down both of those games. So without further ado, let's do it. Welcome back to Hoosier Game Day. Joining me today is Nick Rodecap, one of our football beat reporters here with the Hoosier Network. Nick, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this weekend at Iowa. Fun atmosphere at Kinnick Stadium. It's Iowa's homecoming, so it should be a fun trip.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into all things Iowa Hawkeyes, we got to take a look back into last week against Illinois. That game, one that caught a lot of national media coverage, attention, chatter, you name it, it was there. And a lot of people thinking that it could have been a trap game for IU or that maybe the Hoosiers wouldn't pull through. However, Nick, they pulled through.
Yeah, in the atmosphere of Memorial Stadium, you and I are both seniors, so we remember it was derelict not too long ago, and that first big play, the block punt turned touchdown by D'Angelo Pons, I was on the field. It was deafening. I've never seen anything like it at Memorial Stadium, the largest crowd in program history, and this is uncharted territory for Indiana football. I think that kind of showed the nation that last year wasn't just a flash in the pan. This is something where maybe Indiana football is now here to stay, and I think it's upsetting a lot of people, but for Indiana fans who have suffered for 50, 60 years, I bet they think it's pretty cool.
They do think it's pretty cool, and you saw a lot, that phrase going around a lot last week, excuse me, maybe this year's Indiana is just Indiana. So that's something to kind of consider and think about going forward. You also had some great performances out of Fernando Mendoza last week. Could you kind of talk about that more?
Yeah, Mendoza, I mean, the raw numbers just strictly on volume aren't going to impress you, but he's thrown more touchdown passes than incomplete passes in his last couple of games, and it speaks to his efficiency, his decision-making. He's gotten so much better at going through his progressions and finding open receivers from week 1 to now. I mean, that was only 4 weeks ago that he was talking about how he wasn't pleased with his performance, but now he talks about the offense as a unit that could be dominant. He's got so many weapons at his disposal. The receiving core, I mean, we knew Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper were good, but guys like Riley Nowakowski coming in, making big plays, not just in the passing game, but also blocking. And Indiana's offense is so diverse in the ways that they can beat different teams. They're one of the top 5 offenses in the nation in total yards per game. And Mendoza's not even on the field for the whole game because Indiana is dominating. But Fernando Mendoza, one of the Heisman frontrunners right now, and for good reason. He is an efficient field general, the offense's point guard, as he calls himself. And I'm glad that he's getting the chance to shine because you knew he had the tools at Cal, but now he's got an offensive line as well and showing just how dangerous he can be.
Super dangerous quarterback for the Hoosiers, and one that is a great that they were able to return such talent. The defense. Now, they were flying around. We heard Pons and Fisher say after the game that, they didn't have much action, essentially, because that interior line and just that D-line in general was so dominant. And they got to Altmaier a lot. Altmaier saying that, they were changing it up. It was dominant. It was just dominant all around. Nick, what was your opinion of that?
Yeah, I think we were kind of concerned about Mikhail Kamara's numbers being down, but I think that's actually a good thing because it means he doesn't have as much to do as an edge rusher. You've got guys on the inside like Mario Landino, Tyree Tucker, who have become game wreckers for Indiana. And that's huge because it means, O-lines can't just double team Mikhail Kamara the entire game. They've got other guys to worry about. And this is going to be a very cool matchup, I think, this weekend. Iowa, big, physical, honestly pretty good offensive line, especially if you look at the PFF grades. They've got 4 of the 5 highest graded O-line positions in the country, and they're all on the same unit. So that could be a really interesting matchup to watch out for this weekend. But also you might see then, if they're going to focus more on the interior, that's where Mikhail Kamara could come in, that's where Aiden Fisher could come in. But Indiana's defensive front 7 has been so good at putting pressure on the quarterback. It felt like they were in the backfield against Illinois seemingly every play. feeding off the energy from the crowd, and the crowd's not going to be on their side this weekend, but definitely something to keep an eye on is, can Indiana get that same pressure into the backfield, even if it's not from the interior guys? They've got so many that you've got to account for. I feel like it could be a determining factor on Saturday.
Absolutely. And you've kind of started to break into that Iowa talk, and let's start with the crowd. Sold out crowd for Saturday night Saturday afternoon, really. And Indiana does not have the greatest history of winning in Kinnick Stadium in Iowa. When Indiana had big crowds last year, Notre Dame and Ohio State, they really struggled offensively with that silent count. Do you see the noise this week affecting Fernando Mendoza and his offense?
It's tough because Kinnick Stadium, one of the toughest places for any visiting team to play. And it's been a long time since Iowa hosted a ranked team. Now, part of that is by virtue of playing in the Big Ten West for so long. Thankfully, they got rid of divisions because they were lopsided. But this is something to keep an eye on because that was one of the biggest struggles for Indiana last year, was handling big game, hostile environments. And Notre Dame Stadium and Ohio Stadium, or the Horseshoe, I should say, two of the toughest places for any team to go into in all of college football. Now, the one difference is that Kinnick isn't as big. Kinnick's got a capacity just shy of 70,000, but still, that's 70,000 people screaming in Fernando Mendoza's ears on every offensive snap. So it's going to be big for Indiana. I think you've got to start small. Usually in these games, you see them maybe run the ball first, go run heavy, and Indiana over 300 rushing yards per game. They're pretty good at that, but also short passes, something to get them in rhythm, methodically move the ball down the field. Maybe you take a shot because a big splash play early, I mean, we saw it happen at Memorial Stadium. That can take the energy out of the crowd, if only for a moment, and then we'll see if Indiana can build from there. But it's going to be Mendoza's first real test in a hostile environment in the Big Ten. I'm interested to see how he handles it.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I want to get your opinion on this. Very opinionated person over here. Iowa's head coach went on a press conference this week and compared this game in Indiana to Ohio State. What were your feelings about that?
I think his point, Kirk Ferentz winning as coach in Big Ten history, when he says something, there's going to be some truth to it. I think he made a good point in that you're picking your poison right now with Indiana's offense. If you try to key in on the run, Fernando Mendoza is going to beat you over the top because Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper have shown the ability to make those catches in one-on-one situations. If you choose to key in on Indiana's receiving core, well, they've got 3 running backs, so that includes Roman Hemby, Kalon Black, and now Kobe Martin, who has really come onto the scene with the second-teamers in the last couple of weeks, but he's making a real impact as well. Any one of those 3 running backs can also beat you. So it's a question of, okay, are we going to get beat this way? Are we going to get beat that way? Or are we going to get beat with Fernando Mendoza using his legs? Because he's shown the ability to do that, which is something Indiana did not have with Curtis Rourke playing on a torn ACL last year. It made Indiana's offense two-dimensional. But Indiana's got so many different ways it can beat you offensively, and Ferentz also talked about how Indiana gave up, 2 rushing yards against Illinois? Mm-hmm. And then the special teams play, we've already seen a punt return touchdown from Jonathan Brady. He's one of the better returners in the country, though he hasn't been utilized as much the last couple weeks. And then the special teams punt block from D'Angelo Ponce. And Ferentz said, if you take out all 3 phases, there's no problem. And he got some laughter from the press conference. But I wouldn't say that Ferentz was talking about it as if Indiana and Ohio State are comparable 1-to-1, but just that in game planning, you really can't find a weakness. So he's a very prolific head coach, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. If anybody's going to have an answer for Indiana, it might be Kirk Ferentz. But man, they've got their work cut out for him.
Absolutely. It's work cut out for them. Okay. Where do you see, we talk about the O-line, that being maybe the more obvious place on this team that's going to give Indiana some trouble. That's going to be really kind of head-to-head. Is there any other spots or places or even players on this team that you see maybe the Hoosiers need to look at a little bit differently?
Absolutely. Iowa's return man, Caden Weekjen, one of the fastest guys I've ever seen right now in college football. I mean, he took the opening kickoff from last Friday's game at Rutgers to the house. 100-plus yards, basically untouched. Indiana hasn't really had to deal with that yet. Now, on kickoffs, you can take Weekjen out of the equation by just kicking it through the back of the end zone. And that's what Brendan Franke has done a great job of so far this season, is being a touchback machine. Last year, Indiana did not have a touchback machine, so I would have been a little bit more concerned about it if this game took place in 2024. Punt returns, though, Weekjen returns those too. And, I mean, ideally, you just never punt. That's not realistic, though. You're just going to have to stay disciplined, communicate on the field, stay in your lanes if you're on the kick coverage team. And Indiana's kick coverage has been very good this year when they've been called upon. So that is the one thing to watch out for. Maybe early in the game, Indiana goes 3 and out, has to punt, big return, gets the crowd rocking, and it can snowball from there, as we've seen it snowball on Indiana in the past. You think back especially to Ohio State, what was one of the big plays that flipped that game on its head? It was a big punt return by Caleb Downs. So Indiana special teams is going to have to be absolutely on it on Saturday, because Caden Weechin could get that near 70,000 person crowd rocking really quickly, and it's tough to win on the road in the Big Ten, especially in Iowa City.
Absolutely. And my last kind of question about Iowa before we maybe take one last little bit of a turn. Can you just tell us more about this Iowa quarterback?
Yeah, Mark Gronowski transferred from South Dakota State, the winningest active quarterback in Division I. Now, most of those wins obviously came at the FCS level. And one of the knocks on Iowa over at least recent years under Kirk Ferentz is that they really haven't been able to move the ball through the air. Gronowski kind of follows that mold a little bit. I mean, he's not putting up eye-popping numbers, especially in the volume department, only completing about 60% of his passes. But what concerns me about Gronowski is that he's a dual threat. Iowa's got 10 rushing touchdowns, 6 of them from their quarterback. Nobody else has more than 1, and that's especially interesting. Now, Jazian Patterson, Iowa's top running back, will not play on Saturday. So I would not at all be surprised to see Iowa rely heavily on the quarterback run. That was what Old Dominion burned Indiana with, some of those zone reads where either the quarterback hands it off or he keeps it. And Colton Joseph burned Indiana twice by doing that. So I would not be shocked to see Iowa do something similar. Indiana stressed the importance of defensive communication, and Mark Gronowski is a guy you're absolutely going to have to be talking to. If you're on the field on defense, you're going to have to be talking to each other all the time, making sure that he's accounted for. And when we talked to Aiden Fisher earlier this week, that was something that he stressed was paramount. He said being on your P's and Q's. It sounds like coach speak, but communication is the foundation for success for Indiana defensively. That was one of the things that they did so well last Saturday.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we come back from this, I'm going to be talking more about, you know, kind of where the Big Ten stands through week 5 and the big games coming up this weekend. However, after last week when Indiana beat Illinois, they took a rather large step in the AP poll. What was your opinion on that? Do you think that they should have been put higher? Do you like where they were put? Talk about it.
It's kind of a double-edged sword because you had the AP voters, Illinois top 10 team in their eyes, and Indiana dominates a top 10 team, one of the biggest wins ever by any team over an AP top 10 opponent. You'd think that would have catapulted Indiana into the top 10. But Illinois drops from 9 to 23. I think they should have dropped out, personally. But Indiana, face value, beat a top 10 team by 53 points and did not end up in the top 10. I think if Indiana handles business against Iowa, which is not an easy task at all, as we've established, then you'll see Indiana in the top 10. But I think they should already be in the top 10. This is the one thing, though, that Kurt Cignetti is missing on his resume at Indiana, a road win in a hostile environment. Now, you could say maybe Michigan State last year, but as soon as Indiana started putting up points, those fans left. They left really fast. Indiana got off to a slow start, but they were able to manage. They were able to get back into it. Iowa, it's going to be tougher to do that if you get off to a slow start. So I think the AP voters are going to put some more respect on Indiana if indeed the Hoosiers go into the bye week at 5-0. You're going to see top 10 Indiana heading into Autzen Stadium, potentially to take on top 5 Oregon. Whew, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, fun indeed, Nick, and quite a game to come up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you want to keep up with all things Indiana on the road to Iowa this weekend, make sure that you're following the Hoosier Network. Myself, Ava Wegenke, our guest today, Nick Rodecap, and our other member of our crew, Ian Plaskoff. Thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching Hoosier Game Day presented by the Hoosier Network.